Do you know that many women tend to be quiet, try to people please, avoid conflicts, fear arguments, and criticisms? They keep their thoughts, feelings, and desires to themselves and struggle with communication breakdowns, which prevents them from having happy relationships that they want. Hello, I'm GraceSOULutions, and welcome to Communicates Happily Ever After. I will be sharing with you some magic phrases that you can use that will help you to deal with communication breakdowns in the video series. So if you have missed the previous videos in this video series, that's okay. Stay here for now. In the previous videos, I shared about challenges, mood, mistakes, upset, not funny, the importance of I, complaints, active listening, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about tone of voice. And remember, you are the main character, and this communicates happily ever after. And as in any main character, we know that there are certain tones of voice. Perhaps you said this, and someone has said the same thing to you. Don't use that tone of voice with me. Please watch your tone of voice. What is with the tone of voice that you're using? So, tone of voice can be very subjective. For some of you, you might be okay with someone having a very assertive tone of voice. And for some of you, you might feel like that person is yelling at you. For some of you, you are happy to have that friendly, bubbly tone of voice. And perhaps you have that friendly, bubbly tone of voice. And for some of you, you could feel like, why is that person always so happy? That is so annoying. And then for some of you, you like having a person that has that gentle tone of voice, that supportive tone of voice, so that you feel like you're getting a hug. And for some of you, you're like, oh, come on. This is not how I want to be motivated. I need somebody to kind of push me. Everyone has his or her kind of preference to the tone of voice. You certainly have your own tone of voice and your own preference, and so do I. So for some of you watching my videos, you're like, hey, I like her way she goes about explaining things. It's very gentle. And for some of you, you're like going, Snoreville, or Snoozeville, I guess. Because for some of you, you like that pumped up kind of person that kind of goes, yeah, and it has all this big movements and big gestures, where for me, I have some of that, but for the most part, probably more of a gentle feel. So for some of you, you might feel like Snoozeville. That's okay. I get it, because I'm not for everybody. Right? My tone of voice is not going to make everybody feel good. For some people, yes. And for some people, they're going to say, oh, never mind. She's kind of boring. She's kind of quiet, too quiet for me. Hey, totally cool. For me, I like to listen to certain people because I feel like that connection because of their tone of voice. For some people, I don't have that connection with them because I feel like maybe they're either too preachy, and you might feel that way about me, or I feel like, oh, they're too aggressive for me. Makes me feel like, why are they yelling at me? So my tone of voice can have that same reaction for you. What do we do about it? So the magic phrase that I'm going to share with you in dealing with a tone of voice is, I believe that we want to have a constructive conversation and the tone of voice missed the mark. If you feel like the person is using the wrong tone of voice with you, you can just say, again, I believe we want to have a constructive conversation, and the tone of voice being used missed the mark. Same thing if someone says to you, why are you using that tone of voice with me? I believe we want to have a constructive conversation, and tone of voice missed the mark. All right, you're acknowledging that your tone of voice missed the mark. You also, if the person comes to you, or you feel like the person is using the wrong tone of voice, you're just saying, hey, I believe we want to have a constructive conversation. The tone of voice being used is missing the mark. You're just letting the person know that their tone of voice is missing the mark. This might open up further dialogue. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, I believe the intention is that we want to show support with one another, but the tone of voice that I'm feeling is more of a sarcasm or the tone of voice I'm feeling more is of an aggressive tone of voice. What's wrong with my tone of voice? What do you mean by that? Well, I believe that we're trying to have a constructive conversation, but the tone of voice is too aggressive for that. True? Perhaps? So it's to bring awareness that we want to have a tone of voice that feels constructive to both parties, where both parties are being heard, right? Back to the active listening, as well as back to the importance of I, because we want to be in control, and realize that perhaps in some situations we may not be aware of the tone of voice because we're letting it fly. However, we can always bring that control back. We can always bring our tone of voice control back to us. And of course, tone of voice also has to do with with our personality. Using me as an example, my personality is I tend to be gentle. I'm not tend to be like the ones that super powerful, right? Like go charge kind of a thing. No, I lead, yes. However, I like to lead by being supportive, by being gentle. And so my tone of voice is always going to have some of that connotation. And yes, there are moments where I can kind of go, oh, but they're not always very frequent. And if I want to have that tone of voice, I really then have to bring awareness to it to use that tone of voice. Where naturally for me, I just want to have that gentleness. For some of you, you might have that really bubbly character, right? That bubbly personality. I certainly have a friend like that. She's always so happy. And so she always had that bubbly personality. And for some people, it's like, I don't know how she can always be that bubbly. I mean, there's always something going on. And yet, how is that even possible? But that's who she is. And I was totally cool with that because I like that energy, right? Because, I felt supported. But for some people, that bubbliness is just within them. It's just part of their personality. We can certainly bring some of that awareness and some of that control. But again, if you know like a certain type of conversation and someone is saying, I don't feel like, this conversation is going this way because of that tone of voice, this is where we can voice that, right? I believe that we're wanting to have a constructive conversation, or we want to have a constructive discussion here. And yet, tone of voice being used feels too aggressive for that. And I know some of you are going to be like, well, what happened if we're in a moment? We're in a moment of having an argument. We're not going to, pay attention. We're just saying what we're saying and letting it fly and everything. Well, here's my thing for you. Here's what I want you to think about. Later on, when you're more calm, do you regret the tone of voice that you used? Did you regret what you said? Did you regret the way you said it? If you answered yes, this is why I'm bringing this, because I want you to start to have an awareness. Because if you have an awareness of your tone of voice, you have an awareness of the way you are speaking, if you have an awareness of the way you are acting, you can stop it. You can stop it by saying, okay, this is what I need to change. Now, how am I going to change it? I can change by starting with the words I use. Instead of putting the blame on another person, I'll take some accountability now. I'll be in control of the way I communicate. So I'll use I statements. I can pay attention to my body language. I can pay attention to the tone of voice that I'm using so that it is a constructive communication rather than destructive. So even if you're in that heated moment, yes, it's just going to take even more effort for you to bring awareness, to bring it down. Having said that, it's much easier, yes, to be aware when you're calm and when you're having a discussion, right? But yes, it is a challenge when you're in a heated moment, but it's not impossible. It just takes more effort when you're in that heated moment to be more aware of your tone of voice, body language, words, all of that. So again, for your tone of voice, I believe that we're trying to have a supportive conversation, or I believe that we're trying to have a constructive conversation. I believe that we're trying to have a thoughtful debate or discussion here. And the tone of voice being used right now, it doesn't support that, which then opens up again the dialogue of, well, what do you mean by that? And this is where you can just say, well, because this tone of voice feels aggressive, or this tone of voice feels like it's just one-sided opinion or point of view, that only one point of view can be shared. Just having that dialogue. All right, so that is the topic on tone of voice. If you or anyone you know struggle with communication breakdowns or struggle with communicating thoughts, feelings, and desires, please visit my website, GraceSOULutions.com. That's GraceSOULutions.com to see how you can book a 30-minute complimentary session with me. Yes, it's a free complimentary session with me, no obligation whatsoever. This could change your life forever.